fire regulations, which are displayed on the screen behind me. The three emergency exits, 1, 2 and 3, downstairs, and we meet under the canopy outside Waitrose. There are no fire practices planned for this evening, so if the bell goes, it's for real. Can I also ask you to switch mobile phones off or to silent, please? And specifically for the webcast, can I introduce the officers sitting on the table in front of me? Elizabeth Sims, Head of Planning; Peter Cleveland, Head of Development Control; Louise Yandel; Rachel Callaths; Ryan Snow; Dan Bainbridge, our Borough Solicitor; and Gemma Patterson. So, members of the public, I know there are only a few of you there, but we'd be grateful if you would respect those around you and the committee and the officers, and please do not criticise members of the committee or the officers. I take great exception to rudeness or anything else along those lines. So no cheering, no booing, or any other form of disturbance. This is a meeting held in public. It's not a public meeting. On to the agenda now. The minutes of the meeting that took place on the 27th of October have been on the table for the last 30 minutes. I sign them as a correct record of that meeting. Thank you. Item 2. Emma, apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillors Brian Adams and Jim Edwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Emma.
None before the meeting, but I believe all Housing and Town councillors declare a non-pecuniary interest.
Thank you very much. Questions from members of the public? Have we had any, Emma?
None received.
Thank you. Peter Cleveland, relevant updates, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have two matters to update the committee on. The first relates to an amendment to Part 16 of the General Permitted Development Order, which relates to permitted development rights afforded to telecoms communication operators. The main changes comprise, with regards to emergency uses, the period for which land may be used in an emergency has been extended from 6 months to 18 months, and now includes a requirement to notify Natural England if works are located within a site of special scientific interest. In terms of new masts, prior approval is now required for masts in AOMBs and conservation areas of up to 20 metres in height, and masts on undesignated land of up to 25 metres in height or 20 metres where this is adjacent to a highway. In terms of alterations and replacement masts, prior approval is now required for increasing the height of masts on unprotected land to a height greater than the existing mast or up to 25 metres. Again, it's 20 metres maximum adjacent to a highway. And on Article 2.3 land, which is the OMB and conservation areas, the amendments to heights to that is higher than the existing mast or, again, up to 20 metres, so it follows in terms of the additional allowances for new masts. In terms of building-based apparatus, there's now no limitations applied to the installation, alteration of small cell systems on buildings which are not dwelling houses or within the curtilage of dwelling houses, although that development remains subject to the conditions set out. Just to confirm that small cell systems comprise low power radio access nodes that operation under licence and unlicensed, and have a range of sort of 10 to up to 2 kilometres. Hopefully that's useful. And also have an update on the National Planning Practice Guidance. There's about 20 pages of updates, so I don't intend to take you through all of those, but what I will do is just highlight a few that are key to decision making. The majority of the others actually relate to neighbourhood planning and policy formation, which I don't intend to take you through, but I will circulate the updates for members separately so they can look at them in their own time. But just to pick out some of the key updates and guidance, there's now an updated model checklist for site-specific flood risk assessments for applications, revised wording regarding and advice regarding planning obligations, although this really doesn't change much in terms of what we're doing and refers back to the 3 sort of statutory tests set out in the SIL regulations. Confirmation that affordable housing contributions should not be sought from small-scale and self-build development. The requirement for a local planning authority to notify the EA if planning permission is granted for new development likely to lead to deterioration of a water body. There's further advice regarding the funding of wastewater treatment and that it's and their facilities going forward, and it confirms that developers could make a contribution towards that and just clarifies guidance around that. And it also provides advice regarding the types of properties that will not be required to pay an infrastructure levy once it's applied. Obviously we don't have one in place at the moment, but that is something going forward. As I say, they are just the highlights from those, and I will circulate them so you have a link to them and they're available to you. So happy to take any questions on that, but I'll follow it up with a written email. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter. Application for planning permission, site visits. In the event of site inspections being necessary as a result of consideration of the applications at this meeting, they'll be held on Tuesday, the 3rd of January 2017, at a time to be agreed, normally 10 o'clock. Can I ask members, when they get agenda items, if they wish for a site visit, please let's try and have it in advance of meetings, not afterwards. Moving on then, item A1, WA 2016-1812, erection of 2 dwellings associated garaging, formation of a new access. Excuse me. Totally wrong. Item A1, 2016-1509. Erection of 5 dwellings following demolition of the former commercial buildings and dwelling at 1822 St Christopher's Road, Haslemere. Rachel would like to introduce this application to the committee, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll start with the location plan you'll see on screen here. You'll see the site outlined in red. You'll see it's on a corner junction on St Christopher's Road. Turning now to the aerial plan, you'll see the site, it's just here for you. Here you'll see the existing buildings on site, and you'll see surrounding the building that's primarily hard standing used for car parking at present. Turning now to some existing site photographs. Here you'll see that area of hard standing to the side of the building. This also forms part of the application site, this building here, here and here. You've got an arrow on the map there just to give you some context as to where that photo's taken. This is looking towards the front of the buildings now, this being the application site itself, and these are the neighbouring property terrace which attaches to the application site. You'll see that there's a mixture of both single-storey buildings and 2-storey with roof accommodation on site at present. Finally, this looks opposite the site where you're back to the appeal site, looking in this direction here. Got an arrow pointing to this building as there is a permission on this site which is, it looks like they're just ready to start building out by judging by the scaffolding around it. That gives you some context from these plans below as to what would be facing the application site. Turning now to the proposed scheme. As you may be aware, this proposal is a revision of a scheme previously dismissed on appeal, also for 5 dwellings, on grounds of visual amenity and overdevelopment. This proposal remains for 5 dwellings. You'll see those set out here. There's a rear access, which gives access to the rear gardens, and you'll see that parking is primarily provided to the front of the proposed dwellings. A total of 8 car parking spaces are proposed. This is the proposed front elevation. You can see faintly outlined here the existing building on site. And you'll note there's a variety of materials on the front elevation, and you'll notice the tower feature on the corner. This might be a bit faint for you to see on screen, I'm not sure, but this is a 3D image here of what the front elevation would look like. Again, this looks from up above. You'll notice the tower feature on a corner here, roof lights on that front elevation, dormers and gable features. This is the proposed side elevations. This is the view coming around the corner and that bend on St Christopher's Road. You'll see it's a two-storey development, also with accommodation in the roof space. And you'll see there a variety. Both the tower feature would be most prominent on that corner. It's also worth noting at this point the difference in land levels between the application site and this neighbouring dwelling. This is that same view, if you can make it out on screen, the 3D image of that side elevation. Turning back to talk through the differences of the appeal scheme, this is a current proposal shown on the left of the screen, with the appeal scheme shown on the right. In particular, you'll notice a change on plot 5 in terms of the actual layout. You'll see the removal of this parking space just here, and which increases consequently the garden area for plot 5, which is the larger building or dwelling on site. You will also notice that there is some increase in the landscaping to the front of the building. That is achieved through a reduction in number of car parking spaces. On this scheme you've got 10 parking spaces proposed. The scheme before you tonight has 8. Turning now to the elevations comparison, on the top of the screen you'll see the appeal scheme that was dismissed, and below the current proposal. Talk you through some of the key changes. Particularly you'll notice to the roof form there's been a lot of changes from the appeal scheme. You'll see the addition of these gable features centrally. There's been changes to materials, so you've got a variety of materials there, which adds interest to the elevation. I'll be able to show you better on the next screen, but you'll be able to see that there's also a reduction in height of about 1/2 metre from this, and that's consistent across the whole ridge line. One of the effects of that as well is that the chimneys do sit more prominently within the street scene. This gives you a more close-up comparison in terms of that reduction in height from the appeal scheme, which stood at 9.5 metres, and that's dropped down to 9 metres on this scheme. I've also marked on here, this is the height of the adjacent terrace to which it adjoins. So you'll see that actually the gap between the proposed scheme and the neighbouring dwelling has been reduced quite considerably from the appeal scheme. I've got on screen here an alternative parking layout, and I'll talk about parking in a bit more detail at this point. For those familiar with the appeal decision will recall that the application was originally refused on the grounds of an under-provision in car parking. As mentioned, the previous scheme provided 10 spaces, but that was still under the requirement within the council's parking guidelines. However, on that appeal, the inspector awarded costs to the appellant because he considered that the council had unreasonably applied the parking guidelines. The proposal would fail to meet the parking guidelines, and that's as it stands today, for areas outside the town centre. The scheme would provide 8 car parking spaces, which would, however, meet the requirements for a town centre location. The council's parking guidelines do allow applicants to put forward alternative justification where it is considered that there is a case for a lower level of parking than is set out in those standards. Turning back to the appeal decision, the inspector clearly states that the site does represent town centre characteristics, particularly in terms of its proximity to the train station and also being within walking distance of local shops and bus links. The inspector also concluded that should any limited overflow parking occur, it would be no more harmful to the character and appearance of the area than the existing parking situation. In addition, the reduced level of car parking, that's the drop from 10 spaces to 8 spaces, has allowed for additional landscaping to the front of the site. To explain a bit more about the alternative parking layout, the applicants have also submitted this scheme which actually provides 10 spaces on site. The scheme before you tonight actually has 8 spaces, and that was shown previously. However, there is an option if actually the committee considers the preference is to have additional car parking spaces at the expense of that additional landscaping, then this could be something to be controlled by condition if that's the preference. To take you through the determining issues on this application now, the matters of principle and technical opinion are the principle of development, the loss of the existing commercial use, the impact on trees, housing land supply, housing mix, the standard of accommodation, and highway safety. The matters of judgment are the parking, design and impact on visual amenity, and the impact on residential amenity, and the amenity and play space. The conclusion, as set out in the officer report, the proposal would provide 5 dwellings in a sustainable location in the developed area of Hazelmere. It is considered that the proposal would add interest and variety to the street scene, such to provide a significant visual improvement over the existing buildings. And the changes in comparison with the appeals scheme are considered to address those concerns raised by the inspector. The proposal is therefore considered to be acceptable in terms of car parking provision, having regard to the site's sustainable location and the site's town centre characteristics. The proposal will provide suitable amenity space for each dwelling and a good standard of accommodation for future occupants, and would not cause any harm to neighbouring amenity. If I could turn your attention firstly to the update sheet that was sent round yesterday. You'll note that there were 3 additional letters of representation received on this application raising objection. Those have all been considered by officers, however they do not raise any new material considerations, and as such the agenda report is considered to be comprehensive in terms of addressing those concerns raised. You should also have an additional update sheet on this item. Following the submission of additional information to and dialogue with Surrey Wildlife Trust, Condition 19, which relates to ecology, and Informative 3 have therefore been amended. The change to that, you'll see it struck through, is removing the requirement for the works to be undertaken solely during April to the September period, and that is an approach that has been agreed by Surrey Wildlife Trust. Informative 3 has been strengthened to remind the applicant of their statutory duties in terms of protecting wildlife. That brings me now to the updated recommendation. That is that permission be granted subject to conditions 1 to 18 on the agenda report and amended condition 19 as set out on your update sheet, and informatives 1 to 3, including amended informative 3 as set out on your update sheet. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Rachel. We're now moving into the public speaking part of the procedure. So can I first introduce Simon Gray to speak as an objector to the scheme? Ms. Gray, you have 4 minutes from when you start speaking.
Thank you, everybody, for giving me your time to speak on this matter. I'm Simon Gray. I live at number 16 St Christopher's Road, so I'm the neighbour of the new development that's proposed here. I've been here for 15 years. I'd like to be here for many more years. I've got with me 6 objections to the proposed development, 5 from locals and 1 from the Hazelmere Society. Could I just point out that this has been rumbling on for over 2 years with various amendments, reapplications. At no point at any time in 2 years have any of the locals supported this, not one voice. The town council have only ever raised no objection, but there is no one supporting this application. The fundamental problems as the neighbourhood that we see, and I'm afraid there is no new information that you probably have. I've only just learnt that new information would have been welcome, but the main problem that we still overridingly see is this is complete overdevelopment, shoehorning too many houses into too small a space. Currently there are 2 apertures for cars to leave this site onto the main road. That's going to change to 8 if this application is accepted. We're also asked to accommodate 15 bedrooms in 5 houses times 3 bedrooms. That is an awful lot of development into this very, very small site. I'd now like to plea on behalf of my neighbours on number 13, numbers 15 and number 17 St Christopher's Road. They are on the landscape or on the downside of the hill. The landscape sits uphill, and at 3-storey development, and with them on the the west side of the development, they are going to be kissing the sun goodbye, ever rising through their windows ever again. Certainly number 17 and number 15, because the new development will be coming in front of their houses and will be going up massively. That will be a significant factor that they'll have to live with. We don't particularly like the design. The street is predominantly Edwardian houses. We don't see particularly much in Edwardian features that are in the property there. And lastly, I would like to just put in a plea for my tulip tree. That's that big tree that's on the corner of my house there. It's the largest tree in St Christopher's Road. I suggest to you it's possibly the largest tulip tree in Hazelmere that can be seen and enjoyed by the whole of the town. I'm a horticulturalist and a landscape contractor. It's under stress already at the moment, being in its close proximity, fairly close to the road. It sits 1 metre back from the boundary of the development, and 5 metres of the canopy overhang the development. That 5 metres of the canopy is also, generally speaking, where the root system will extend to. And on this site, which is going to be so difficult to build on, and I would imagine there's going to be an 18-month build period, the pressure to use that land, albeit that the arboricultural report may say the land around the root plate should be protected with Harris fencing, etc., the pressure to put materials on there, I can see deliveries catching my tree, knocking chunks out of it. I think it will be the death knell to our lovely tree, currently protected by a TPO, but I think it will suffer more stress, and I think we'll lose that, and I think it'll be a great shame, not just for us as the residents, but the whole of the street, and largely for the people that live Hazelmere and enjoy that lovely tree. That's the end of my deposition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. Now can I introduce the supporter, Mr. Jesse Chapman.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the committee, for giving me the opportunity to speak in favour of the proposal this evening. As you know, in assessing the scheme and in making their recommendation to approve the application, your officers have identified the submitted application as being fully compliant with the Council's relevant policy documents and overarching planning advice contained within the National Planning Policy Framework. I would also like to add that the applicants, the architect and your officers have worked extremely hard in attending various meetings and producing amended plans to address the outstanding issues relating to the previous proposal at the site. As such, you will note from the very thorough officer report that the proposal before you has fully considered the Council's reasons for refusing the previous scheme and the inspector's reasons for dismissing the appeal. The proposed development takes the form of 5 new dwellings, with the scale of the proposed new homes being significantly reduced, and all contentious matters set out by the Council and the Inspector relating to the previous proposal fully addressed and overcome. Furthermore, there has been no objection from any of the Council's statutory consultees, including matters relating to arboriculture and to highways. I also emphasise that the site is within the built-up urban area where the principle of new sustainable residential development is acceptable. The application at the site comes forward at a time, as members will be aware, when the council is facing pressure to develop sites outside of settlement areas. The objections of local residents and the Hazelmere Society are noted. However, it is submitted that the proposal before you represents a high quality, appropriate and in-keeping form of development, and one that will undoubtedly see a significant improvement to the existing arrangement at the site. In summary, it is submitted that the application before you represents a carefully considered architect design proposal for 5 new, attractive and in-keeping family homes with their own private gardens and situated within a sustainable location where the principle of development is acceptable. I reiterate that the application is being recommended for approval by your officers, and the contentious matters relating to the previous application at the site have been fully addressed and overcome. I hope members have found this useful. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Members, I open it to you. Councillor Mulliner.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think I'll start off by reflecting on what's changed since the last time this application was heard. And 2 things have happened. One is that the local plan is now very close to its submission, and we are now declaring a 5-year housing supply, or 5.3-year housing supply. Perhaps more materially for Hazelmere, as colleagues know, I'm keeping a close eye on the housing supply situation there, and we have in fact permitted 68 dwellings in 2016 alone. And at this rate of permission, we would fulfil our allocation of 830 homes in about 7.5 years' time. The point I draw from that is that we have no reason not to be selective in the applications that we approve over the next few years, and I think we should be selective and should insist that applications tick all the boxes. We shouldn't feel in any way pushed or pressured into approving things we're not really fully comfortable with. I recognise the efforts the applicant has made to address the points made at the appeal, but I think the question that remains for us as members, and not for the officers, is to decide whether they have improved enough. And I have some sympathy with the objectors' comments that this does seem to be overdevelopment. In fact, I think squeezing a quart into a pint pot is the phrase that springs to my mind. I note that the inspector made the point that although he certainly approved, and I entirely agree, that the existing site needs to be improved, and a residential development would certainly do that, he wasn't sure that the appeal proposal was necessarily the right way to do it. And I must admit I have doubts about whether this one is the right way to do it either. I think one can see the pressures the applicant is under, in that there are 4 dimensions which certainly appeal to me. One is the scale of the development, the next is its visual appearance and impact of it and its surrounding hard standing on the street scene. Then there's of course parking itself, and there's the adequacy of the living conditions for the occupants. I think the 2 areas where I have problems are the parking, which, as it's clear, the applicant is well aware that what the inspector actually said was that 2 spaces per dwelling was acceptable and reasonably generous. He certainly said nothing which justifies moving down to almost the town centre level of 1.5 spaces. Reading the inspector's decision, I couldn't help feeling that he doesn't perhaps understand Hazelmere parking concerns as well as we do. And the reason why we're so sensitive about it is, of course, we have a very popular station which attracts people from as far afield as the south coast. So in short, any development, and I think of the larger one at 5 to 21 Way Hill, which we have been thinking about for some time, which offers less than adequate off-street parking, is going to get fairly short shrift. And I think what we're offered here is a choice between 8 parking spaces and a slightly more attractive frontage, or 10 parking spaces and a slightly less attractive frontage. And really, a good application wouldn't put us in that position. It would offer an adequately attractive frontage and enough parking. I certainly think that any less than 2 parking spaces per dwelling is unacceptable. I think if colleagues prefer to permit 5 3-bedroom houses here, even though they don't meet the policy requirements, which would require 1 and 2-bedroom houses as well, then I would certainly be in favour of the 10 parking space option. But I have to say that, subject to what others say, I am personally doubtful whether, although this is an improved appearance, it's actually sufficiently less massive to overcome the scale problems. I feel that 4 dwellings here would be a far better option, would improve the area, and would make it a much easier application to make look good, and therefore to approve. So at the moment, Chairman, I'm disinclined to support the officers.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Just ask the officers to confirm, but my recollection reading the appeal and the awards of costs was that the inspector said that the number of parking spaces was adequate. Perhaps, Rachel, you could just bring that one up.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I can certainly provide some more clarification. The inspector did say that the number of parking spaces at the appeal scheme was acceptable. That was 10 spaces, as opposed to the 8 before us now. However, critically, the inspector also made clear that he considered the site to have town centre characteristics. And secondly, that any overspill parking would not be harmful to the character of the area. That, of course, is primarily a justification for our parking guidelines. And it's having regard to those comments that the application is recommended for approval with those 8 spaces as opposed to 10. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Can we just try someone else, if there's anyone else? Yes, you. Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wondered, the gentleman who spoke, who is a neighbour and spoke in opposition to it, referred to a view expressed by the Haslemere Society, which I've been trying to find in the papers here, and maybe I'm not looking in the right place. Can I ask what that view was, if we have any record?
Well, the officers are checking that. Councillor Mullen, you wanted to come back?
Just for the sake of accuracy of the record, what the inspector actually said was that the site exhibited some not insignificant town centre characteristics, which I don't think he was saying it was a town centre site, and I don't think...
Correct, sir. We did get the costs against us, so that is significant. You want to come back, Councillor Round?
Well, while we're looking for the Haslemere Society's view, if we have it, I just wanted to say that I certainly think that 10 parking spaces is required. I can't see how you would sell these things by saying some have 2 and some have 1. And I think it's quite material.
Councillor King.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got very mixed feelings about this, I have to say. I think the applicant has done a really good job in improving the architecture and the design of this building compared to what it was. It's a lot more in keeping with the properties facing that side of the road than the last one was, and would certainly fit in a lot better. The height's been reduced, which will help to reduce some of the bulk, but I'm really sorry. A town centre development, this never is, and I live at this end of town, and actually to sort of say it's part of the town centre of Haslemere, is that probably slightly insulting to Haslemere town centre itself. So we won't go there, but I must say I would certainly support the 10 parking space, the alternative parking approval, but I'd still think this is an overdevelopment of this site. Thank you.
Councillor Hess.
I'd just like to reinforce what Councillor King said, specifically about the height of the roof. If it had respected the height of the existing buildings, I'd have been quite happy with this, because there are lots of, attractive aspects to it. But I'm afraid for me, it certainly just looks like overdevelopment, given the height of the thing. this thing is going to land like an aircraft carrier amongst a sort of flotilla of yachts.
Councillor Inchbald.
Thank you, Chairman. If this was an application for 4 dwellings with 8 parking spaces, I wouldn't have any problem with it at all. I am concerned about what the objector said about loss of light to neighbours. Can officers clarify that for us a bit, please, and give us some more information? Thank you.
Rachel?
Yes, just to talk briefly about the relationship with neighbouring dwellings. The height, I suppose it's worth considering that it is something that was considered on the appeals scheme that went before the inspector, and they did specifically consider the impact of the development on adjacent properties. However, they did not dismiss the appeal on those grounds and did consider the scheme to be acceptable in that regard. It's also worth noting that the scheme has come down in height in comparison with that. This slide I've got on screen now gives you a slight indication of that. It's half a metre difference here, but obviously for those dwellings directly facing opposite, that would be their main view, and actually that reduction in height is clearly a benefit to them. Given that and the inspector's decision and consider that element was acceptable, that's obviously reflected in the officer recommendation there. Thank you.
Councillor Round again.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I only raised one of the points that was in my mind earlier. The other one, like Councillor Inchbald, is if it were 4 houses and they weren't so cramped, it might well be better. May I ask, since I don't think it's that clear, this plan is very useful, but it only shows the applicant's site. How do the widths of these proposed dwellings compare with the Edwardian terrace that they are next to? And also in the same vein almost, do we get the impression from the paperwork here that the rooms are rather small? Are they below the recommended sizes?
Rachel, it's all yours.
Yes, there's a table. There's a table on page 24, which I confess I don't totally understand.
Yes, certainly I can provide some more clarification. Thank you for that question. It's not on the same plan, but the best place to get some comparison in terms of the building widths is taking a look here at the location plan. If I can start by showing you this, and then I'll take you back to the block plan. As you know, the block plan itself only goes slightly beyond the ownership, but you'll see they are quite narrow plots there along that road. If I take you back to the proposed block plan at this point. Again, so it's difficult to tell, but you can see a division mark just here, which gives you an indication of the width of that building. So you'll see they're not dissimilar to the widths of the proposed dwellings just here. Turning to the space standards in a table that you've pointed out, the room sizes and the overall internal size do meet the space standards.
Yes, I'm sorry I hadn't read it properly. My neighbours just educated me. And how do they compare height-wise with the existing terrace of Edwardian houses?
Thank you, yes. I've tried to illustrate that point here. So this 8.4 metres, that's the height of the adjoining terrace of property. So you'll see there is a difference in height between that and the proposed scheme, which is 9 metres. It's also worth pointing out that the existing building and also the height of the previous appeals scheme is shown by this blue line here. That's the 9.5 metre mark. So you'll see that has come down half a metre. And obviously at present, albeit it's a narrower building, you have got a greater discrepancy in height between those two buildings.
Thank you. Councillor Inchbald. Oh, sorry. Councillor Hess.
I just think it's worth noting that whilst the original or the existing building is apparently 9 metres high or whatever it is, of course that doesn't extend across the width of the whole site. That's point number one. And point number two is, I must say, I'm struggling to understand what's 8.4, because the 8.4 seems to be significantly above the top of the barge boards on the neighbouring house. Are we comparing the top of the roof with top of roof, or halfway up the chimney, or what is that trying to show?
Thank you. That's the top of the ridge line of that dwelling here. I think it's slightly confused by this arrow, which is pointed at a not helpful point for you to understand that diagram. But it's 8.4, the main ridge line of that dwelling. That's obviously the eaves height significantly lower.
Okay, it's just that the 8.4 is below the top of the chimney and significantly above the top of the gable. I can't make out why that line is where it is.
Yes, I'll show you a photo of the street scene as well, but this is a gable feature, so this is not the main roof line you see here. There's obviously a higher ridge line here. I'll take you back to the photograph as well, which will hopefully show that point. Yes, here. So you'll see, probably not the best angle of this photo, but there is a higher ridge line here, and that's the gable. Okay, thanks.
My own personal view is that this is a vast improvement on the previous scheme. For 5 townhouses, I agree that the better scheme is for 10 parking spaces, and I would like to see that conditioned, but that's my personal view. So, Councillor Mulliner, and then we'll move to the recommendation, I think.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was keen to see that, because I think we should see the gables on the arts and craft buildings all go up to the ridgeline, don't they? Yes. And clearly there are gable features on the new building, but I wouldn't call them faux gables, but they only go so far up the roof. I mean, the difference is perhaps a point of attraction rather than detraction, but I think what the full height gables do is to give you a much more differentiated effect looking at it. I think my underlying worry is that, whereas aircraft carrier may be a slightly unkind comment, the fact there's a constant ridge running the entire length of it is what really grabs my eye, and I rather agree with Councillor Inchbold. I just think a 4-dwelling development would be so much better, and as I said earlier, I think we should be looking to get the best solution on these sites, because we're under no pressure whatsoever.
Do the officers want to make any comment? Peter Cleveland.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could just come in. On page 8 of your agenda, you've got the elevations, and actually, just to clarify, the terrace of the arts and crafts style properties you referred to, the gables are actually set down from the ridge height. It's that angle, because we're looking up at it, it looks like they're level with the ridge height, but they are actually set down. If you look at the top of page 8, you can see the indication of where that sits. Again, it's the question about the arrow drawing and where the actual ridge line is, but it's actually the line above that, adjacent to the chimney. So what you've got before you is a continuous ridge line, as with the neighbouring properties, with gables which match that. If I could just ask Rachel, sorry, to go to the street scene, and you can see that, and you can see that comparison. The gables are the same height. Yes, so on there you can see, so on the left-hand side of that drawing, that is the gable of the existing property. Then it's got that arrow, which I appreciate that's not clear, but then the second line above that is the ridge of the neighbouring terrace. So I actually think it does respect that form. So hopefully that's useful, just to clarify that position, because I appreciate on the plan you can't see the whole lot. So thank you, Chairman.
I also ask that people consider whether we should condition 10 parking spaces at the front of the building as opposed to the recommendation of 8. Members? Yeah. Yes. Can I move to the recommendation then? The revised recommendation is that, subject to conditions 1 to 19, informatives 1 to 5 on pages 29 to 38, as amended, condition 19 and informative 3 in the additional update, and a further condition to allow for 10 car parking spaces, that permission be granted. Those in favour, please show.
2.
Those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Therefore, I need a proposer, seconder, and reasons for
Chairman. What's the recommendation based on the 10 or the 8?
10.
Thank you. Right. I think then the reason I would give is just by reason of its scale and mass and overdevelopment, contrary to D1 and D4.
We have a seconder. Councillor King. Officers. Peter Cleveland. Louise.
I'd recommend the following. Having regard to the size, scale and mass of the buildings, the development will result in a cramped appearance that would amount to overdevelopment of the site. The development fails to preserve the prevailing character of the area and would be out of keeping and cause harm to its visual appearance, contrary to policies D1 and D4 of the Waverley Borough Local Plan, the Hazelmere Design Statement, paragraphs 17, 58 and 64 of the NPPF, and policy TD1 of the Draft Local Plan.
Numbers too. Numbers. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so we'll start with the location plan. The site is located on the northern side of Way Hill Road at the junction with Way Down Road. The site is currently occupied by a two-storey building which has been divided into 6 flats with amenity space and car parking to the rear. The surrounding area is very mixed in character. To the northeast of the site is a public car park. Industrial buildings are located to the northwest, and to the west are residential properties. Here you see the aerial photograph which quite clearly demonstrates the existing building of Way Hill House, there to the south of the site, and the associated hard standing used for parking currently. Move on to the site photographs. The top left photograph shows Way Hill House fronting Way Hill Road with the existing access to the right hand side. The top right photograph is from the rear of the site, looking back onto the rear elevation of Way Hill House there. The bottom left photograph is the site viewed from the junction of Way Hill Road and Way Down Road. And the bottom right photograph is of the existing access, which would be utilised as part of the proposal. So, moving on to the top left photograph, which shows the eastern part of the site, with the access at the bottom right-hand side of the photograph there. And then finally, the bottom right photograph is of the existing, shows the northwest section of the site with neighbouring amenity spaces beyond. Here we have the existing and proposed block plan. On the left we have the existing block plan detailing the location of Way Hill House and its associated land. On the right, the proposed block plan demonstrates the location of the proposed 4 new dwellings. Unit 1 is located to the southwest of the site in the corner there. Units 2 and 3 would be located to the north of the site, and Units 4 would be located to the northeast corner of the site. 10 parking spaces would be provided within the site, 4 for the new dwellings and 6 for the existing flats at Way Hill House. Here we have the proposed elevations and floor plans for Unit 1. Unit 1 would comprise of a communal bin and cycle storage at ground floor level and a 2-bedroom flat at first floor level. A new roof link extension is proposed to join the proposed dwelling to Way Hill House and create an underpass for pedestrians and vehicles to access the site. Here we have the proposed elevations and floor plans for Units 2 and 3, which would comprise a pair of 2-bedroom semi-detached dwellings. And finally, we have the proposed elevations and floor plans for Unit 4, which would comprise of a single 2-bedroom dwelling. In conclusion, the proposal is within the developed area of Hazelmere and is considered to be a suitable location for the provision of new housing. It would be acceptable in terms of design and impact on surrounding neighbours. As you can see, the matters of principal and technical opinion are the principle of development, lawful use of the site, housing land supply, housing mix and density, impact on trees, highways and parking, flooding and drainage, and effects on the SPAs. Matters of judgment are design and impact on visual amenity, standard of accommodation and provision of amenity space, and impact on residential amenity. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Ryan. Members? Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chairman. May I ask what is proposed to happen to the eastern boundary along the stream? And where exactly is the boundary? Is it above the stream or is it the centre of the stream bed?
Chairman, if I may help here, it's actually Waverley's ownership, that piece of land.
The stream.
The land that Councillor Brown's referring to.
So the land alongside this site? Yes, I was thinking of that, but I wondered where the boundary... So Waverley owned both banks of the stream?
The boundary of the site is most clearly shown on this plan here, which is the existing one, and the stream is here. And yeah, both banks of the stream are owned by Waverley.
Sorry,
the red line is quite clear. I think.
What you showed, Louise, is the footpath along the side of the car park. The stream is the rather more grey. That one, yes. I was just wondering what was going to be done with that boundary.
Councillor Mulner. Go on.
Thank you, Chairman. I think my only concern about this is the fact that although we haven't, actually adopted the technical standards, nonetheless they do give you a pretty good hint as to how generous or cramped these living conditions are going to be. And when I see on page 53 that Unit 2, 2 bedrooms, 79 square metres is indicated, but it'll be 70.4, which is, it's more than 10% less. I mean, and likewise for Unit 3. And then if you look at the bedrooms, they're even more than 10% below, and bedroom 2 of Unit 4 is a sort of shoebox of 8 square metres. I mean, this is the same problem, I think, that we're just getting applicants trying to squeeze in the absolute maximum and hoping we won't mind. And to repeat myself, I think we are entitled to mind. And I don't think we need to approve something which is being so cramped and so ungenerous in space. And I'd like to see them come back with a 3-dwelling offering rather than 4, where they could actually give people some decent living conditions. So I'm afraid I'm not going to be supporting this one either unless I hear something convincing from my colleagues.
Councillor King.
Thank you, Chairman. While I recognise the very strong need for this type of accommodation in Hazelmere, what does concern me are the number of households on a relatively small site with virtually no amenity space at all. And purely on those grounds alone, I can't support this. There just is virtually no amenity. The amenity that exists for the present residents of Way Hill House is disappearing under bricks and concrete, so they will be losing an amenity they currently have in the garden. And purely on those grounds, I can't support this, I'm afraid.
Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I'm still not happy with the state of the eastern boundary. The point is that is that is a part of Hazelmere that I know the Mayor and others have a wish to beautify and are discussing that very subject with officers in Waverley at the moment. We don't know whether there's going to be a high 8-foot wall or a fence. It could be considered, I suppose, in these days of concern about health and safety, it could be considered dangerous for small children if they were to live in these houses. what is proposed for the boundary, and that thick black line on the right diagram there can't be the boundary because it envelops an area with trees which is the amenity space of one of the properties. Do we know what the applicant proposes?
Louise?
If members are concerned about the treatment of that boundary, what we could do is recommend a condition requiring full details of the boundary treatment to be submitted and approved prior to the commencement of works. In relation to this space here, that you refer, that is an area of sort of communal landscaping and open space within the site.
Councillor Inchbold.
Once again, Chairman, there are just too many dwellings for the site. I think Unit 4 is the absolute deal breaker. It just doesn't work. It is just a horrid little house, and if they had gone for 3 dwellings on this site, yes, I don't think I'd really have a problem with it. But this just looks so cramped. Thank you.
Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I just ask officer to clarify the number of parking spaces? There were 6 spaces for the existing Wayhill House residents, and how many for the new properties?
Thank you. Yeah, there'd be 4 parking spaces for the 4 units provided. That is in accordance with the Waverley Borough parking guidelines. Thank you. They're located within the site. Just forward of the units here, here, and here. Thank you.
Councillor Round, you.
Sorry if I'm hogging it. I remember also there were points made at a previous examination of this application that is there adequate space for emergency vehicles like a fire engine to get through that arch at the entrance? I mean, I agree with my colleagues, it is cramped. It actually could be a very attractive site. It could encompass the semi-rural nature of the stream running alongside the car park, and which I banged on about just now, but it doesn't. I think it's overdeveloped, but I do wonder if we are worried about the height of access.
Thank you. Just to that, I'd say that the Surrey County Council Highways Authority undertaken an assessment and raised no objection to the access there. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Inchbold, and then we'll move forward, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just ask, where is the amenity space for Unit 1?
Thank you. Yeah, so there is no amenity space allocated to the flat of Unit 1, but it would obviously be allocated the shared landscaping space in the middle of the scheme there. Thank you.
Can I ask if the officers want to say anything else in summing up? Peter.
I think Ryan and Louise have picked up on most of the points. I just wanted to clarify the point on the space standards, because we have been taking them forward and looking to defend those and taking them forward. We've had quite a recent appeal decision where we weren't criticised, but the inspector didn't uphold them because he was quite specific in saying that because we haven't adopted them as yet, it's obviously the intention to through the local plan, but as we haven't got them adopted as yet, he gave limited weight to us relying on those. It was a similar position, similar type site where it was a small sort of loft space that fell below, and the inspector, as I say, didn't give much weight to that, and that's the only reason why we've moved away from that slightly and weighed it up in balance. So hopefully that's helpful just to take account, but of course it's something for members to consider. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, members, if there are no further questions, can we move to the recommendation? Recommendation is that subject to conditions 1 to 22 and informatives 1 to 8 on pages 64-71, permission be granted. Those in favour, please show.
None.
Those against?
That'll be unanimous.
Thank you. Can I have a proposal for rejection and a seconder and the reasons for, please? Councillor Monner.
I'll have a go. It's basically the same reasons as in the previous application. Not so much scale, but number of dwellings and overdevelopment. I also think that, though I listen, of course, to what Peter Cleveland said, I think even though we needn't rely on standards which we haven't yet adopted, we can still take from them a judgment that the living conditions are inadequate. And if that could be encompassed in the reason, I think it would be advisable. That's certainly what worried me most, but I know that others had different concerns.
Amenity space also. Can I have a seconder to the motion? Councillor Piper. Thank you. Louise.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd recommend the proposal by reason of the number of dwellings, size of accommodation and lack of amenity space would result in a cramped and crowded appearance which would be out of character with the surrounding area. The proposal would be contrary to policies D1 and D4 of the Waverley Borough Local Plan 2002, the Hazelmere Design Statement 2012, paragraphs 17, 58 and 64 of the MPPF, and policy TD1 of the Draft Local Plan.
Those in favour of refusal, please show.
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Item B2, the last one, erection of a dwelling land, Longlands, West End Lane, Frensham. Gemma, it's all yours to introduce, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The site lies to the south of West End Lane and comprises garden curtilage associated with Longlands. The site is immediately abutted to the east by woodlands, including designated ancient woodland to the southeast. There are some mature trees located within the site along the eastern boundary. Longland lies to the west of the site, and there are clusters of residential dwellings to the north of the site, beyond West End Lane, and to the east of the site, beyond the woodland. The site currently accommodates 5 outbuildings associated with Longlands, located to the north of the site. These would be removed as part of the proposal coming forward. The application seeks permission for the erection of a 2-storey, 3-bedroom dwelling with associated hard surface vehicle parking. The proposed dwelling would share the existing private drive from West End Lane with Longlands. The proposed dwelling would have a maximum ridge height of 7.5 metres and would be of an L-shaped design. A main hipped cat slide roof is proposed with 2 gable dormer windows in the front north elevation and 2 gable eaves dormers in the south rear elevation. The overall design of the proposed dwelling would be traditional and would utilise first floor hanging tiles and a chimney. The proposed floor plans shown on this slide demonstrate the proposed internal layout of the 3-bedroom dwelling. Looking at some site photographs, this slide shows the external views of the site along West End Lane. This slide shows views internal to the site. Members will note the existing outbuildings associated with the Longlands in View C. View D shows the shared western boundary between the site and Longlands. View E is taken outside of the site from Longlands, showing the existing western boundary hedgerow with Longlands. View F shows an internal site view, and members will note the flank elevation of a single-storey element associated with Longlands. View G is an internal site view that shows the western flank elevation of Longlands, and View H shows the northeast corner of the site. Oops. Moving to determining issues, to the left of the slide, the matters of principle and technical opinion are principle of development, having regard to the location of the site within the countryside beyond the Greenbelt, where the countryside should no longer be protected for its own sake, as this policy is out of date. Development of garden land, noting that the site falls within the definition of previously developed land within the MPPF. Location of the development, having regard to surrounding residential development and accessible village amenities, thereby preventing the development from being considered as isolated within the MPPF. Standard of accommodation, having regard to the proposed dwellings meeting the government's technical housing standards. Impact on trees, having regard to the Council's Tree and Landscape Officer's technical opinion in relation to the acceptability of the loss of a young oak tree of limited significance on the site, and the overall conclusion that the proposal, subject to suitable conditions, would have an acceptable impact on the significant trees surrounding the site. Impact on highways, having regard to the County Highway Authority's assessment of the site in terms of the access, visibility displays and traffic generation associated with the proposed development, to which no objection has been raised. Effect on the SPA and SAC, noting that although increasing the number of permanent people within the site, there is availability of alternative recreational opportunities within the area to accommodate this, and that any increased levels of pollution would not be significant. And finally, biodiversity and compliance with habitat regulations, noting that Surrey Wildlife Trust has raised no objection to the proposed development subject to conditions. Moving to the right of the slide, members being asked to exercise their judgment on the impact on the countryside, noting the context of the site surrounded by clusters of residential properties, and in noting that the boundary trees are to be retained, preserving the verdant character of the area site. Design and impact on visual amenity, considering the overall scale, form and design of the proposed dwelling, and impact on residential amenity, having regard to the existing topography of the site, the presence of existing boundary treatments, and the overall distances between the site and surrounding properties. Members will also note that there are some safeguarding conditions proposed. Moving to the update, members will note that planning permission has recently been granted at Longlands for a single-storey rear extension. Officers have considered the impact on the neighbouring amenity of this extension from the proposed new dwelling and have considered it would be acceptable, subject to the imposition of Condition 5 in relation to screening along the western boundary. Furthermore, in considering the proximity of the site to the proposed dwelling, the site to the dwellings to the north, it is considered reasonable in the interests of neighbouring amenity to recommend a construction hours condition. Therefore, the revised recommendation is that subject to conditions 1 to 19 and informatives 1 to 6 on pages 94 to 102 of the agenda, and additional condition 20 as reported on the update, that permission be granted. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Gemma. Members, Councillor Martin.
I think this is one of those cases where I really haven't got a feel for it at all, and I haven't, I'm afraid, gone out to look at it, and I wonder if a site visit would be called for. And so now I'm happy to propose it if anyone is prepared to second it.
Sorry, is there a seconder there? No. No. Thank you. So, Councillor Inchbold.
I think I've got a duff microphone. Could I just ask officers, how many houses are there in reasonably close proximity to this site? Yeah, quite a lot, aren't there? Yes, I think that answers my question. I can't see any objection to it at all.
I've been there. I agree with you, sir. Councillor, go in.
I probably live nearest to this site for anybody else on this committee, and I think probably Councillor Inchbald's question has been answered just by looking at that site. I don't normally like development of garden land, I don't normally like development in the countryside, but given where this plot is and given the screening and everything else about it, I really find that there's nothing really that you could refuse this on.
And it's also an attractive design, I think. It is not just bog standard. Sorry, wrong word. Can we move to the Councillor Round?
Well, just as an observation, Councillor Hess and I were just wondering, it is an attractive design. I see no objection to it. It looks rather nice. Could we, yes, have that block diagram up, please, where you show the previous one. There. Thank you. Why is the house so near to the boundary? And there was a window, I think, or windows in that wall of the Longlands building that is smack up against the boundary. I don't particularly mind either way, I'm just surprised.
Keeps it away from the trees. Sorry, Gemma.
As the chairman has just said, it does keep it away from the sort of ancient woodlands to the more east of the site, so trying to keep it as far away as possible. And the window that is proposed in the western elevation, we have a condition on there for that to be obscurely glazed and non-opening. Thank you.
Peter, understand? Yep.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to pick up on one point, which was an update to the report. Obviously, there's buildings on site currently, and just in the description, we just need to slightly amend that. And apologies for this late stage, but just ask members to consider that the description shouldn't just be erection of dwelling; it should be demolition of existing dwellings on site, outbuildings, sorry, not the existing dwellings, existing outbuildings on site, and the erection of a new building, and we'd recommend an additional condition requiring their removal prior to occupation of the building. Obviously, some of them will need to be demolished to provide the access, but there's a number there. I think that's an offset. It is countryside, so we need to take account of that. So we'd recommend amended description and the additional condition. Add to that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Peter. I'll just wait till Emma's written this out for me to read out again. Got so many amendments. What
was the extra condition?
The extra condition, Peter.
So, thank you. Yes, it would be condition number 20, and it will pick up the requirement for the removal of the existing outbuildings prior to occupation of the proposed dwelling.
That's 21.
21, sorry.
Yeah.
21, thank you, Chairman.
So, here we go then. I'll try and put this revised recommendation subject conditions 1 to 21, informatives 1 to 6 on pages 94 and 102 on the agenda. The additional condition 20 as reported on the update sheet. Permission be granted. Those in favour, please show.
That's unanimous.
Unanimous. Permission is granted. Thank you, members. That's it until June 2017. January.